Hello and welcome to Monocle on Culture. I'm Robert Bound. On today's show, we're going to meet one of the world's truly great documentary filmmakers and photographers, Lauren Greenfield. Lauren's work is defined by a forensic yet warm attitude to subjects at the heart of contemporary Western life. Money, politics, media, identity, fame, even infamy. Her 2012 film, The Queen of Versailles, skewered the American dream by asking who would build America's biggest house. It revealed much about aspiration and hubris. The Kingmaker from 2019 followed Imelda Marcos as she campaigned to put her son at the top of Filipino politics. But even Marcos's studied deflection of introspection turned out to be psychological box office. Lauren's most recent series for TV is named Social Studies and follows a group of Los Angeles high schoolers, fresh or not, from COVID lockdown into a new school year lived in real life, of course, but against the ever-present backdrop of their online lives, full of friends, but also expectation, aspiration, desire for beauty, money, popularity. Sound familiar? The teenagers are from different classes, races and backgrounds, but all are struggling to an extent with the maddening demands of social media. We see them at home, at school, hanging out with their friends in real life, but ingeniously, Lauren has the teenagers grant her, and therefore us, access to their social media. Their comments, chats, photos all ping up on screen in real time. It's a dizzying masterstroke that gets under the skin of the social media age. Indeed, the series is a thing of and for the ages. So, to talk about social studies, here is Lauren Greenfield.
I started very open-minded, open-hearted in the sense of like, I don't know what this story is going to be. I had some ideas from my work on young people, even going back to the 90s, where I was looking at how values like image and materialism and celebrity and the importance of fame were affecting them. And I kind of went in wondering if these things were amplified in the social media age. But I wanted to really frame it as a social experiment. So I talked to almost 200 kids to make a selection of a small group who also had to select me in the sense that to be a part of this project, they needed to give me access to their phones, which was a big ask.
It's like the Holy Grail, right? I mean, that is really opening Pandora's box, as is proven in this series, yeah.
So that was kind of the premise, that we were going to really explore all. I felt like social media was impacting all aspects of life, from relationships to sex to education to parental relationship, to tastes. And so I wanted to really do this 360, following characters with like character-driven stories, but at the same time, seeing that interaction with their social. And so I kind of knew from the beginning that I wanted the social to live on top of the live action, for the audience to be able to see it at the same time, not cut to a black screen with a box, but to take it in the way we do in real life, and with all of the challenges of navigating the distraction, the contradictions. And so formally, what we end up getting is this kind of multidimensional look where we're seeing real life, which often looks quite different from what we're seeing online. And then we followed the kids for a year, and then in shaping it into something that the audience could take in, because it was 1,000 hours of footage, 2,000 hours of social media, I tried to follow the stories that would allow us to look at 1 year at school, but also have each episode hit one of the big themes that I knew wasn't even just one person's story, but was like so many kids' stories, even in our small group. So the first one is really about it's a kind of introduction, but coming back after COVID, but also deals with bullying and body image. The second episode really delves into class and race and materialism and how all of these things are amplified. The third, we get into what I call algorithm pressure, which
so it's a good phrase to coin, that one, right?
the new peer pressure.
Yeah.
That kids are not comparing themselves against the kids in their class anymore, or even the popular kids in another group, but against the entire world and how that affects them. And then in 4, it goes into a kind of a heavy place with sex and how kids learn about sex and what the trends are, which are pretty troubling. And then in 5, it also goes to a dark place, really looking at the prevalence of suicidal ideation. But strangely enough, there's a lot of hope there too, because the kids do have resilience. They prevail. They finish school. They find their voice, which I think is that antidote to being like everybody else, to comparing yourself to other people negatively.
Yeah, there's a real that's wonderful, and it does feel like there is a real arc to the stories that you tell, and that the kids tell themselves, and that there are a lot of dark moments in it. There are a lot of supremely charming moments, and some of that is to do with just because they're wonderfully cast and they're lovely kids, a lot of them, and also some of it's because of the hectic nature of some of the editorial that you're putting before our eyes, mixing the social media with your actual film and with interviews, with following people around the streets and at school and stuff like that. But there is a real sense of sunrise actually at the end of the series. Without spoiling it for anyone, there's definitely light at the end of the end of this social media tunnel. And I wanted to ask you, this all takes place in your hometown of LA, right? And it started, I think, during lockdown, and so there's a lot of mask wearing and a lot of people kind of coming out into the daylight, I guess, after being cooped up inside their bedrooms and their homes. So tell us about the school. It's at Palisades Charter High School, and that's got a real mixture of kind of different folks there. So tell us about why you chose that school, and then how you cast the film, because you said you spoke to 200 kids to start with. Yeah.
Yeah, and they ended up being actually from almost 10 schools around different areas in LA. But I started at Palisades Charter High because it's so diverse. It's actually a public school. Well, I think your public is our private, but it's a state-funded school, not one people pay for. But it's in a very wealthy area, the Palisades, which sadly people know now as the place that burned only 6 months ago. So some of those places, including the school, were burned in the fire. And it drew from 100 zip codes, meaning kids get bussed in from all over the city. And so within this one campus, we have kids from so many different neighborhoods in LA. And you'll see in the show, for people who are not familiar with the geography of LA, it's like 10 cities. I mean, there's so many different, kind of microclimates in LA.
Yeah.
And then starting with that, I also let it kind of grow organically, where people would bring in a friend or a sibling, or I would follow a story and another person as part of that story would come in. Jonathan was a young filmmaker.
And he's brilliant, isn't he? He's going to go far, I think, as well.
And some of the subjects that he was meeting or that he worked at Teen Line, he would tell me about, and then we would invite them in. So I tried to get a very diverse group, not just socioeconomically, but also in terms of their use of social media and their past with social media. So we could I wanted the audience of young people and parents to be able to find themselves in these kids in a lot of different ways. It turns out the way a lot of young people find themselves is not actually by seeing somebody who looks like them. It's actually by seeing somebody who had a social media experience like them. That's what I found, that, it doesn't matter color or socioeconomic. What mattered is like, I was slut shamed like that girl. I really identify with her. So that's how I started. And coming out of COVID, first of all, I thought my project was ruined in the beginning because I actually started developing it before COVID, and then all of a sudden kids were in school and I didn't want to do a whole thing on Zoom. So I didn't know if we would be able to do it, but we ended up beginning right at the beginning of coming back, like you said, when people are coming out of the darkness into the light. And that turned out to be the perfect natural experiment for this, because social media use went up very dramatically during COVID. Kids were talking about 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day. But it didn't go down. The habits didn't change after that. So they kind of brought in to their in-person social life all of the habits of social media from during COVID. And then LA, I mean, it's interesting because I remember my first book, Fast Forward, when I showed it in England, people were like, oh, those crazy people in LA. Luckily it's not like that here. I think what's happened with my work, including Fast Forward, is now people realize, like, coming soon to a theater near you. Like, England may not be, the tip of the spear like LA is. LA has been a good place for me to explore these trends because it's also where Hollywood is and influencers go and the kind of extreme of the image making culture. And yet we see that because this culture travels at the speed of light with social media, there's a homogenization of culture that's happened. So I recently showed social studies at a film festival in Thessaloniki, Greece, and they brought together a group of teenagers for us to meet like we do in the show. And they said, this is the first time I've seen a show about us.
Wow. It's incredible. And it does feel like that. It's got such incredible kind of cut through on so many levels, so many issues. And I guess the unifying thing is youth and social media and media more generally, I think as well. But one of the things you do, one of the brilliant things you do in the film, Lauren, is have these discussion forums at the end of they're dotted through each of the episodes to discuss how people felt in this moment or about some of the issues. And sometimes they're the setup almost to an episode, and sometimes they're the culmination of one. And they're almost like a therapy session for these kids. And you're very light touch, I think, as well, aren't you? You're kind of nudging them a little bit, but basically they're having a discussion amongst themselves. One of the first questions you ask, though, to get the ball rolling is how many of you guys have gone viral? And lots of them have, on TikTok, on Snapchat. And some of the girls really quickly start talking about Kim Kardashian's sex tape and how maybe that's worth it. You've got to get your message out. And when we go off to some very dark places, particularly about sex in the series. But was that a response you were kind of expecting from that when they're a little bit wet behind the ears at the beginning of the process with you, right? But they obviously wish they hadn't gone viral by the end of the series, I think. But yeah, I wondered how many questions were in the back of your mind before you picked on that one to start with.
Well, I was kind of amazed at how many had gone viral. I knew Ellie had told me, and I knew from kids in general about her story with she had a viral story that was kind of famous throughout LA, where she had a boyfriend who was famous, and then when they broke up, she got famously canceled, and everybody knew. And this was like a story of a 12-year-old. So, but I had no idea how common the experience of virality was. But that was one of the reasons the group discussions were so important, is to see, I really wanted to explore themes that were not one person and somebody could say like, oh, that person just has a tendency towards an eating disorder, or that person is dressing too provocatively. My daughter would do that, or I would do that. I really wanted to show that these things are so common. And I think in the social media age and with social contagion, the shared experiences are so common. Like, everybody thinks they're unique, and then they, get in this group. And it was, part of why I did the group was I started for my own research. I did not know we would use them in the series, actually, until we got into the edit room. But the young people, I could feel they really wanted those groups. Like, it was a revelation for them, often the first time they were hearing other people going through the same experiences that they were.
I'd love to give our listeners a bit of a run the gamut of the kind of people that are in the film, the kids that are in the film, and how they use social media. There's young Jack, who uses TikTok and Snapchat to kind of push his business ideas, and he's got a clothing line. He promotes these super sort of glam parties for kids, but he starts off with these fit tests, right? And he stops people on Rodeo Drive to ask them how much their outfits cost and what the brands are. And of course, these kids love talking about their outfits and what they've teamed up with, different things. He's very much a live wire. And then you've got Kashawn, who's a wannabe hip hop star, and he wants to be a breakout like hip hop star on TikTok specifically. So he's kind of using it for that, to corral interest. And then you've got a girl like Sydney, who's super young to be posting kind of increasingly sexier pictures, and she's getting a lot of pushback, but a lot of I guess heart emojis pinging up on her feed as well. So yeah, you've run the gamut there. I wondered what you were trying to. I guess you were trying to really get a broad church effect with the kind of different people, and that TikTok and social media can be good and used for good and profit, and obviously used for ill as well.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to really look at the gamut and not be judgy about the way it was used, but I think there's a kind of growing up quickly aspect to all of it. For Jack is an incredible entrepreneur. On the other hand, we don't really expect people to be running businesses while they're studying and making a friend in high school. And even he, who's so, capable, ends up having a party with multi-hundred people where it ends in a drug overdose. So these situations are a lot to handle for, these young people. Keyshawn, I don't want to be a spoiler about his personal life, but he also grows up very quickly and is dealing with things that usually people much older are doing. Now, for him, it's also a means of social mobility. His mom is a single mom. He lives in South LA. He's really looking at it as a career kind of opportunity. And I think that's, something where a lot of kids are like looking at this as a way to make money too. Sydney has a similar story. It's not about money, but it's about fame. She started on Instagram, tried posting her passion, which was photography, got no attention, no likes. Then posted a picture of her body, everything changed. This led to a rabbit hole of more and more provocative pictures, and you are doing the parent-friendly version when you say it's heart emojis she's getting, because she's getting a lot more emojis that I had to learn even what they meant when I was doing that.
There are a few, I think there are a few eggplants, as you'd call it, in there.
And
let's not go there.
I think that, that's the good, the bad, the ugly, the scary. That's just the reality of what these kids are dealing with every day. And I think my point was not like, there's good, there's bad, it's more like just seeing it all. I mean, I did end up coming out of it feeling like the kids do, that this is actually too dangerous for kids to be around. Like Jonathan in episode 5 says, it's a lifeline, but it's also a loaded gun.
It's a brilliant quote. Yeah.
That's the kind of, quandary for them on a daily basis. Like during COVID, of course, it literally was the only social lifeline. But then even coming back, it's the way they communicate. Now, we remember there are other ways to communicate, and they find that in our group sessions because they don't have phones in the group sessions. And by the end, one of the most surprising things that happened is they said, what if we could just talk like this out in the real world? And I think that was so like simple, but so surprising, and also very hopeful for me, for them to want something that seemed so obvious in my generation, but is not obvious in theirs. And I think it does give hope, though, that these young people can see so clearly, but they live in this world with this very addictive product that is being given to them like candy. And, as parents, like, we don't just leave open bowls of candy in the house, because like that would not be fair. Like, so I think that's, now the adult society is left with a quandary on how to handle this situation.
And you mentioned there it's sort of like the breakout sessions, as it were, these more therapeutic sessions for the kids, which obviously they have a much different register to and kind of sense of connection with each other than the kids have when they're posting on social media, when they're absorbing their friends or other people's social media. And then there's a third register, which is how they are in front of your camera. And it's super interesting to see the clash and sometimes the mesh of those different registers. And I wondered what you made of that. And obviously it's one of your stocks in trade, Lauren, to know how people are before and after you turn the camera on. And I think we've talked before about, there's sometimes very little, or you're with your subjects for long enough to get them used to the camera being there and to opening up to you and stuff. But yeah, how would you describe the difference between the confidence and the actorliness of their performances on social media and their really looking you in the eye as an interviewer and as a presumably became a friend over the process?
One of my teachers from college, who's a brilliant filmmaker himself, Rob Moss, was an advisor on the project, and he called it visual cubism, because you're kind of seeing, at the same time, the filmmaker point of view, and then you also get a chance to see how they see themselves when they hold when we see their looking at themselves in their phone, for example, like Ella in class. And I mean, I think that's one of the brilliant things about documentary film for this subject matter that's different from, a book or reading online or any other medium, is that we can see those different points of view. And point of view is the meat and potatoes of, everything that I do in photography and film. It's like we see, there was in the interviews with me, I felt like they really become truth tellers, and they break it down, and they are like the experts on their own lives. And then also on this subject. And then when I'm following them with cinema verite, like following them with cameras in their lives, they are teenagers doing all of the, lying, cheating, posing for their friends, trying to get their boyfriend to, think they're the best, whatever it is. And we even get to see some of that happen in real time. We see Ellie jumping out the window to go meet her boyfriend, lying to her mom about where she's going, while we see her on her phone ordering an Uber to go to her boyfriend's house and telling her mom, like, Mom, I'll be in a second. So I think was really, for me, the magical moments that, are that unfolding that you can't predict, but is what makes, watching their lives exciting, and also what makes us see the nature of social media, which is that it's not real. It looks very different from what we see. There's a scene with Sydney, who you mentioned before, where she's telling the story about making all these sexy videos, and she's wearing a pastel sweatshirt looking very awkward, innocent, fidgeting in a beautiful kind of suburban room with pastel colors and, sweet quotes on the wall. And then you're seeing her social, which looks like it could be an OnlyFans site.
Yeah.
So I think those, that's how we break down what social media is. That's how they say, we're just being our best selves, or other people are just being their best selves. And it makes us feel really bad, or it feels like everybody is the Caucasian beauty standard on social media. I'm brown, I'm big. How do I feel? How do I fit in? I love having those kind of 4 different domains, because I think it helps us understand what they're living through, and there are multiple sides, because I also think we have empathy for this generation, I think, from the show, because there is a tendency, and I was guilty of that myself with my own son, to be like, oh, get off your phone, you're wasting your life, you're wasting your time. And actually, I think, it reminds me of when I did my film Thin about eating disorders. Before I did it, there was a lot of like, why can't they just eat a hamburger? And then when you're, what's so hard about eating? And then when you're in the show, you see like, no, this is actually a mental illness that's dreadfully difficult. And they did it to show us, what that was like, despite all of the obvious image reasons why somebody with an eating disorder would not want to be the subject of a documentary film. This is the same. These kids gave up privacy. They took a risk. They took a risk of their mistakes being out there for everybody to see. But they knew it was in the same way, like this happens to every kid with mistakes now. And they thought, maybe they could make a difference. And I hope it does for the audience.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's, as I say, it's such powerful stuff. And the kids are so likable. And they obviously have these childlike, teenage-like frailties, but they have all of that charm and vivacity and joie de vivre as well. It's sort of powerful and profound and very moving and timely and necessary, I think, as well. Social studies is just brilliant. So thank you for another brilliant piece of documentary art, really. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And that was Lauren Greenfield. Many thanks to her. And Social Studies is screening on Disney Plus and other platforms depending upon your TV territory. And that is it for this week. Monocle on Culture is produced by Sophie Monaghan-Coombs and Steph Chungu, and Steph also edits the show. We'll be back at the same time next week, but until then, from me, Robert Bounds, thanks for tuning in.
What does culture say about the way we live and how we could live better? Join Monocle in Barcelona this September for our annual Quality of Life conference. From bold new voices in media, design and the arts to lively debates on diplomacy, design and urbanism, it's 3 days of fresh thinking and creative exchange. Find out more and book your seat at monocle.com/conference.